There are any number of charities out there that good-hearted, generous Americans look to and say, that is a place that is worthy of my money. And millions give millions of dollars every single year. But is your money actually going to a worthy cause, or is it going to line the pockets of one incredibly dishonest rich individual? Unfortunately, in many cases, it's the latter. And we're joined now by the reporter that broke this story. This is federal politics reporter for the Center for Public Integrity, Sarah Kleiner. Welcome back to the Damage Report.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you here, and great work on this story. So, charities and PACs, the connection between them, what did you discover?
So we discovered that Americans are giving millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to charities and now political committees that sound like charities, and about 86% of the money that they give, so 86 cents out of every dollar, is actually winding up in the coffers of the telemarketing companies owned by one man in Las Vegas. This has been going on since early 2000s, and his operation started off raising hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for charity clients. Then it grew to millions of dollars, then $10 million a year. And we have amassed, we went through hundreds of records, state records, federal records, and we were able to tally up about $153.1 million.
Wow.
And of that, this one man's companies were paid $133 million.
I mean, the fact that this is going on at all is fascinating. The fact that it is so centralized on basically one individual or one corporation, even more so. My gut reaction to this is that this is a gigantic scam. Is it fair to refer to it as a scam? Are any laws being broken, or is this just how ridiculous our system is that something like this is actually legal?
Right. So you raise a great point. It is actually legal in the United States of America to spend the vast majority of money that you raise on fundraising. And that goes for charities and it goes for political committees. What is not legal is lying to donors about how that money is going to be used. And we were able to, through calling dozens of people across the country, in states across the country, we were able to get letters from some of these people showing that the people who run these organizations were saying, for instance, we're going to provide emotional support for parents whose children are suffering from leukemia, et cetera. So it's up to a menagerie of regulators to investigate this sort of activity to determine whether or not any laws are actually being broken.
And while we're waiting for that to happen, people are making a ton of money off of it. You mentioned there the children leukemia aspect of this. What are some of the other sorts of charities that people thought they were contributing towards that instead ended up going to this wealthy individual?
Right. In addition to the Children's Leukemia Support Network, there are 3 other organizations connected to the man behind the Children's Leukemia organization. Those focus on heart disease, people with heart disease, police officers, and firefighters. The man that runs those 4 organizations with his wife is a Las Vegas police officer. And the Las Vegas Police Department, following our investigation, it says that they're looking into the allegations against Officer Pollock and are trying to make a determination about whether or not he's in compliance with department policies. There are a number of other organizations out there. One of them deals with children with autism, veterans. There are several organizations that say they are supporting veterans, but again, 86 cents out of every dollar that's going to those organizations is going to this for-profit company. Yeah. And I should also add that in the remainder of the money that's left over, most of that is going into salaries and overhead. So very little, if any, of the money that you're donating to these organizations is going to help police officers, veterans, firefighters, et cetera.
That is just amazing. Now let's turn to the connection between the charity aspect of this and PACs. So PACs, which are designed to raise money in this way, you detail how some of them are like sort of strategically naming themselves in a way to hide what they're actually doing. What are some examples of that?
Right. So the Children's Leukemia Support Network is actually an example of this. It's a political action committee, and it raises money. And it says the people who run the PAC say that they are going to help parents of children suffering from leukemia, and that they're also going to support politicians who pass laws that would benefit people, families going through a leukemia diagnosis. But there's only one politician who benefited from spending by this PAC, and that politician is former Senator Dean Heller of Nevada. And he actually was defeated in the 2018 election. But the spending that benefited him was less than 1%. So less than 1 cent out of every dollar donated to this PAC went to benefit any politician at all. And donors, we talked to donors across the country who had no idea that this was the way that their money was being used, and they were angry.
And so, look, you've revealed in multiple different ways that this is an incredibly dishonest system, but one of them also is, we know that people are increasingly wondering, for individuals like politicians, but also PACs, when you talk about your fundraising, what percentage is coming from gigantic amounts of money that are given to you by the wealthy, and what is sort of more organically or grassroots raised by small dollar donations. So you reveal how these donations, presumably to a charity the individual thinks, are instead used to pretend that there is grassroots support for this PAC, correct?
Right, so our analysis actually, the analysis by my colleague Chris Zubak-Skees, he analyzed millions of records from the Federal Election Commission, and one of the things that we zeroed in on were the size of the contributions from people. And we were noticing that the majority of contributions to these political action committees are from donors who give less than $200 in total to these political action committees. So that's one sign that we looked at that would indicate, maybe people ought to think twice about who they're giving to. The other sign, of course, is the percentage of money that's going to fundraising, wages, and administration. So,
I guess that gets into it, but my last question is basically, if I want to support a charity, like if I see, like the Amazon's burning, and there's all these different groups that say they're going to do something about it. You mentioned they're checking to see what percentage goes, towards the actual charity portion of it. Do you have any other advice for people who want to avoid having their money eventually just get routed to some Las Vegas billionaire?
Actually, the advice I can give you comes straight from the woman at the Federal Trade Commission who's in charge of regulating charities and telemarketers. And she said, if someone calls you out of the blue and you don't know who they are, don't donate unless you do research in advance. And the way that you can do that is go to Charity Watch and Charity Navigator and sites like that, and look into these organizations before you give. And there aren't that many resources available for political action committees to determine how much money is actually going to the stated purpose or how much money is going into fundraising and salaries.
That sounds like great advice, Sarah Kleiner. Thank you as always, but especially a great investigation here and an important one with financial ramifications.
Thank you so much.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.